Right now, as you watch this, your brain is hiding money from you. Not because you lack intelligence or drive. It goes much deeper than that. The real filter blocking your financial life is biological, and it is running silently, constantly, without your permission. Think about the last time you felt stuck. You worked hard, you tried things, you showed up, and the breakthrough still did not come. You watched others move forward and could not figure out what they were doing differently, because from the outside, it looked like you were doing the same things. That feeling is not failure. It is evidence of a filter that was installed in your mind long before you had any say in the matter. Inside your brain, there is a mechanism that decides what is real and what is invisible to you. It scans your environment thousands of times per second and quietly discards anything it has decided is irrelevant to your survival. If wealth was never coded into that system as essential, your brain will delete every wealth opportunity that crosses your path. The right connection at the right moment. The idea that slips away before you can grab it. The open door you walked straight past without noticing it was there. This is not a metaphor. Neuroscience calls it the Reticular Activating System. Napoleon Hill, decades before the science had language for it, called it the prepared mind meeting the burning desire. Today, you are going to learn the exact technique Hill identified across 20 years of studying the wealthiest human beings of his era. Why your subconscious has been working against your financial life, and the specific documented protocol to begin rewiring it permanently. Stay with this. You do not have a money problem. What you have is a perception problem, and it was written into your operating system long before you could read. The Reticular Activating System, the RAS, is a cluster of neurons at the base of your brainstem. Every second, your senses process approximately 11 million bits of raw information. Your conscious mind handles roughly 40 to 50 of those bits at any given moment. The RAS is the gatekeeper deciding which 40 bits make it through to your awareness. Everything else, deleted, filtered, made invisible, as if it never existed. If your RAS was conditioned during your formative years to associate money with stress, scarcity, or conflict, it will treat wealth opportunities as irrelevant background noise. The connection was there. The idea crossed your path. The opportunity was in the room. But your filter classified it as not applicable, and it never reached your conscious mind. You were not lazy. Your brain was simply running the program it was given. Napoleon Hill noticed this pattern before neuroscience had the tools to explain it. In his earliest interviews with Andrew Carnegie, he observed that the men who rose from nothing to extraordinary wealth did not outthink their peers. They outfiltered them. Their subconscious orientation toward opportunity had been so thoroughly conditioned that they could walk into a room and see pathways completely invisible to everyone else standing in the same space. Here is where most financial struggle actually originates. There is a second force compounding the first. Hill called it the poverty consciousness, what behavioral economists today describe as the scarcity loop. When the brain expects lack, it activates a stress hormone cascade that narrows cognitive function, which produces reactive short-term decisions, which generate more financial instability, which confirms the original fear of scarcity, which tightens the loop further. The brain keeps selecting the same 40 bits, the bits that say danger, the bits that say there is not enough, and the cycle feeds itself. Hill wrote that poverty is attracted to the one whose mind is favorable to it, as money is attracted to him whose mind has been deliberately prepared to attract it. He meant it as a functional description of a mental mechanism. Poverty is an attractor state. It does not simply arrive. It is reinforced each time the loop completes another cycle. Your financial reality today is a reflection of your dominant mental frequency, not your effort, not your intelligence, your frequency. And that is good news, because unlike your circumstances, your frequency is something you can deliberately change. Here is where a generation of seekers went wrong, and the cost was years of wasted effort. When the modern self-help movement reduced the law of attraction to its most marketable form, visualize it, say it aloud, feel grateful, and it will arrive. It stripped away the mechanical precision that Napoleon Hill had spent 2 decades documenting. What was left was an inspiring idea with no engine under the hood. Affirmations without reprogramming are not wrong. They are incomplete, and an incomplete method, applied with sincerity, produces sincere disappointment. Hill was not opposed to affirmations. He built his entire autosuggestion protocol around them. What he insisted on was the understanding that the subconscious mind does not respond to words alone. It responds to emotional intensity combined with repetition, combined with the state of belief present at the moment of input. Remove any one of those 3 variables, and the signal does not transmit. In Think and Grow Rich, he wrote that any impulse of thought which is repeatedly passed on to the subconscious mind is finally accepted and acted upon by the subconscious mind, which proceeds to translate that impulse into its physical or monetary equivalent. The word repeatedly is doing significant work in that sentence. And the word impulse, not a thought, not a sentence, but an impulse charged with energy, is doing even more. This is the same principle modern neuroscience calls neuroplasticity, and it has completely rewritten what science thought it understood about the brain. Until the late 20th century, the dominant view held that the brain's architecture was essentially fixed after early childhood. That view has been thoroughly dismantled. Imaging technology has confirmed that the brain physically rewires itself in response to repeated thought patterns, sustained emotional states, and deliberate focused attention. New pathways form. Underused pathways weaken and eventually dissolve. The architecture of the brain is not permanent, it is responsive. This is the same principle the ancient scripture described in Romans 12, verse 2. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. The word transformed there carries the same root as metamorphosis, a complete structural change, not a surface adjustment. The ancient teachers understood something about the mind's plasticity that modern science is only now quantifying with the right instruments. Napoleon Hill sat at the intersection of these 2 worlds. The lives of the wealthiest industrialists of the 20th century studied with scientific rigor, and the ancient texts describing the same mechanism from a completely different direction. The outer world conforms to the inner world, but only after the inner world has been consistently impressed with a new dominant pattern for long enough that the new pattern becomes the default. Everything else in prosperity teaching is a commentary on that single truth. Now we arrive at the actual technique. Not a concept, a documented method. 20 years, over 500 interviews. Carnegie, Ford, Edison, Rockefeller. Hill studied them all and cross-referenced the patterns. One thread ran through every single case without exception. Every person who had produced extraordinary wealth had first produced extraordinary clarity. Not a vague desire for more, a singular, specific, emotionally charged vision of the exact outcome they were committed to producing. Hill named this the definite major purpose, and he identified it as the non-negotiable starting point for every other principle in his system. He wrote that the starting point of all achievement is desire, not hope, not preference. Desire, burning, consuming, specific desire that becomes so dominant in the mind that it displaces competing thoughts almost automatically. Here is why specificity matters neurologically. The RAS cannot be recalibrated by a vague intention. It requires a defined target. When you establish a definite major purpose with genuine emotional force, you are entering new search parameters into your brain's filtering system. Two people can attend the same networking event, sit in the same room, and walk away with completely different outcomes. Not because one was luckier, but because one brain had a specific target it was actively scanning for, and the other did not. So, how is this installed? The protocol Hill described works on the neuroplasticity principle. A new neural pathway requires consistent, emotionally charged activation over a sustained period before it displaces the old pathway as the brain's default. Hill identified 21 days as the minimum threshold for initial installation, the point at which the new pathway begins to take precedence under normal conditions. The 4 steps are as follows. Step 1. Write your definite major purpose in precise, present tense language. Not "I want." Not "someday." I am. I have. I produce. The subconscious does not process future tense as instruction. Write the specific figure, the specific date, and the specific value you will provide in exchange. Hill was insistent on the exchange. The subconscious rejects something-for-nothing propositions. Step 2. Read this statement aloud twice daily. Once upon waking, when the subconscious filter is at its most permeable, and once at the edge of sleep, when the conscious critic lowers its guard and direct subconscious access becomes available. Step 3. As you read it, feel the emotion of already having the outcome. Hill wrote that faith is the head chemist of the mind, and that when faith is mixed with a thought, that thought immediately picks up a vibration which puts it in contact with infinite intelligence. The emotion is not decoration. It is the carrier signal. Without it, the instruction does not transmit at the required depth. Step 4. Hold the statement as the dominant thought by replacing any contrary thought the moment it surfaces. Not suppressing it, replacing it. Suppression creates internal pressure. Replacement builds the new pathway by activating it in real time whenever the old one would have fired. 21 days, twice daily. Written, spoken aloud, felt with genuine emotion, held as dominant. The method is not complicated. What it requires is consistency before evidence of results appears, which is precisely what most people are not willing to give it. Now, let us bring in the witnesses. Andrew Carnegie arrived in America from Scotland as a child, his father's trade as a handloom weaver destroyed by industrialization. Carnegie grew up with poverty not as an abstract concept, but as the texture of daily life. By every statistical probability, he should have reproduced that reality across his lifetime. He did not. When Hill pressed him on why, Carnegie's answer had nothing to do with strategy or timing. He told Hill that the turning point came when he formed a consuming mental image of what he intended to build. And that image became more real to him than his current circumstances. Not more desirable, more real. He was already living inside the result. The external building of it was, from his internal perspective, a formality. Thomas Edison operated from the same architecture. The documented failures in his development of the incandescent light bulb number in the thousands. Every rational analysis would have concluded the goal was impossible. Edison told Hill that the mind which fixes on a single definite outcome and refuses to entertain the possibility of its failure becomes functionally unstoppable. Not because of willpower, but because it stops wasting energy on alternatives. Earl Nightingale, who Hill influenced profoundly, distilled decades of study into a single sentence in his landmark recording, The Strangest Secret. We become what we think about most of the time. The dominant mental content, the thought pattern running on repeat beneath every other activity, is what the subconscious takes as its primary instruction set. Nightingale documented that the human being is the only creature with the capacity to choose its own dominant thought. And yet the overwhelming majority never exercise that capacity deliberately. Their mental content is determined by their environment rather than by an internal decision. Here is where this connects to your life right now. If your finances are currently producing stress, the foundational question is not how do I find more income? The real question is what thought is running on repeat at the frequency of money in my mind right now. Infinite intelligence, the organizing principle that Carnegie, Edison, Hill, and Nightingale all referenced across their combined work, does not respond to need. It responds to aligned frequency. When the dominant mental state matches the frequency of the intended outcome, and that alignment is sustained with emotional consistency over time, the physical circumstances begin to reorganize. The people, timing, information, and openings that match the new frequency begin to register in the mind that is now filtering for them. Your subconscious has been running a program. Tonight, that program gets new instructions. Your brain was not broken, it was programmed by environment, by repetition, by the emotional weight of early experiences that had nothing to do with your actual capacity. That program installed a filter that deleted wealth opportunities from your field of perception and cycled you through a scarcity loop so familiar it registered as truth. It was never truth. It was a frequency. And a frequency is the one thing about your life you have the most power to change. Napoleon Hill spent 2 decades documenting how that change actually happens. The definite major purpose. The auto-suggestion protocol applied with emotional faith. The 21-day installation period. The real-time replacement of contrary thoughts with present-tense commands. The subconscious is built to receive. These are not motivational suggestions. They are the reverse-engineered methodology of the most carefully studied group of wealth-producing minds in modern history. Ancient wisdom confirmed the same mechanism. Romans 12, verse 2, was not written as inspiration. It was written as instruction. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The writers understood what 21st century neuroscience has now confirmed with imaging technology. The mind can be structurally changed through disciplined, sustained mental practice. New pathways form. Old ones weaken. The filter recalibrates. The world that was always there begins to become visible. Tonight, before you cross the threshold of sleep, you have one assignment. In the final moments before sleep, when the conscious critic is lowering its defenses, speak your definite major purpose aloud. Not as a wish, as a present tense reality. Feel the emotional truth of already having it. Then let that feeling be the last impression your mind holds as sleep arrives. Sleep is not the absence of mental activity. It is the period during which the subconscious consolidates its dominant impressions. What you feed your mind at the entrance to sleep becomes the soil in which tomorrow's perception takes root. Do this for 21 consecutive days without evaluation before the cycle is complete. The subconscious does not operate on your preferred timeline. It operates on the law of sufficient repetition, and the law does not negotiate. On the other side of that cycle, your RAS will have begun recalibrating. You will notice what you could not see before: the connection, the timing, the idea that arrives with a clarity and urgency you have not felt in years. Not magic. Your filter changing its search parameters and your brain beginning to select an entirely different reality from the same environment you have always occupied. From financial blindness to infinite sight. This is the journey Hill mapped, the journey Carnegie walked, and the journey that now belongs to you. If something shifted in you while you listened today, This community was built for you. Subscribe to Napoleon Hill Wealth Code. Every week, we go deeper into the principles that the greatest wealth-producing minds of the modern era used to turn inner conviction into outer abundance. This is not entertainment. It is a training ground for minds that have decided they are done accepting the program they were handed and are ready to write a new one. Welcome to the community of manifestors. And we close with the words of Napoleon Hill himself. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Not a promise about the future. A description of a law that has been operating since the beginning of human consciousness. One that has always been available and is available to you, beginning tonight.